Good morning. I made a whole video yesterday that didn't turn out because my volume, there was something wrong with my mic. When we did the upgrade on my computer, it messed up with my settings, I guess. So anyway, Terry fixed it for me, so I'm going to try it again. And I'm just going to be repeating what I did yesterday, so hopefully I don't just forget something. But I'm talking about traditions today, and I think traditions in the family can be important because it's something for kids to look forward to. We always looked forward to ours, and the only bad thing about them is when they end, which they ultimately will. It's sad because you miss your traditions, and we tried to create some in our family as we grew, your dad and aunt and uncle grew up, but it didn't always work out because Peepaw's family was so large, and they liked holidays. They wanted to just be with their family. So, except for the family reunion, friend and family reunion that we finally got established after we moved up here to the mountains, we didn't have a lot of traditions with Peepaw's family, but with mine we did. We used to do Thanksgiving together all the time, and we always did. I think we generally went to my sister's at Christmas, mostly because she lived in the mountains. The rest of us didn't in it, and sometimes she'd have snow, which was so cool. Um, and we didn't have any other actual times that we did things, but we always had fun and did things. But anyway, when I was a kid, I'll start with our Christmases because our Christmases were so much fun. We almost always opened our gifts in the morning because we liked the excitement of. I hated it one year we did it at night, and I don't know why. I can't remember what the circumstances were. I do remember that my great aunt and uncle came, and my great uncle was Santa Claus, and I think we figured that out probably from his voice. He had a pretty distinctive voice, but he played Santa that year, and that was the one time I can remember opening gifts at night. But it was no fun because then you don't have anything to look forward to on Christmas morning. Well, I mean, we sort of did because we had our other traditions, but it wasn't the same. Anyway, so we'd open one gift on Christmas Eve, and it was almost always pajamas. So we got a new set of pajamas, which was really cool. We loved it, and we knew it was going to be pajamas, and so it was always just what kind they were going to be, and it was very cool. And then we'd go over to my aunt and uncle's. This would be my mother's brother and his wife, and they had two kids, two little girls, and so we would go to their house on Christmas Eve and have dinner. We would do dinner and exchange gifts, and I can tell you, I told you last time about us all having chores when we were growing up, and my sister and I always had the chore of doing the dishes, and even when we went to my aunt and uncle's for dinner, it was my sister and I's chore to do the dishes. So we hated that part. After dinner, we were always in the kitchen doing the dishes. It seemed like we did it all, but of course we didn't. My aunts helped clear table and do all that kind of stuff, but they put us to work doing the dishes, and the other girls may have joined in too. I cannot remember. I only remember that our torture was that we had to do the dishes after these large meals, but it was still fun. And then we'd open all of our gifts, and you know, usually my great aunt and uncle also came. Maybe sometimes some other family would come, but I just sort of remember my great aunt and uncle, and my great aunt was my granddad's sister, and that was my granddad on my mother's side. We did not do a lot with my dad's side of the family, for whatever reason. His father died from complications of an ulcer when my dad was only about 9 years old. So we, of course, never knew him, my granddad. And then my grandma on my dad's side never remarried. So, and she was different. And so you didn't really carry on. She was very loving. I remember loving to go visit at my grandma's house, but it was uh, it was different. She was very quiet and had this religious air, and followed certain religion things that were were different, you know. So we didn't talk to her a lot, but we loved going over there because she always had these cool things. They lived. My dad grew up. I guess he grew up there. I don't know. I mean, he spent most of his life there, I guess. On a small parcel of land, you know, maybe an acre or two, and they may have had more and sold. I don't know. Anyway, because he tells me about his dad having this ulcer attack when he was out on a tractor. So they must have had some land that required a tractor. But when we used to go visit, it was a larger plot of land than the neighbors, but it wasn't a lot of acreage or anything. Had cool things like he had built a chair out of rocks that he put together with cement. Made this chair and a rock wall. It was beautiful. I wished we could have managed to get those out of there before we sold the property, but too heavy, couldn't carry them. But anyway, it's cool. And I got sidetracked. So anyway, my so that's how the family tree goes. With my great aunt and uncle being my grandpa's sister and her husband. And then they never had kids. So they kind of adopted us and my cousins, my uncle's two little girls were their kids because they never had kids. Anyway, then we would come home from there on Christmas Eve, and of course we'd be there late enough that us kids would be very tired, and so it was easy to fall asleep on Christmas Eve. If we didn't do that, then it was harder to fall asleep because you're anxious about Christmas morning. And we'd put on our new pajamas and go to sleep. And in the morning, you know, one of us at least would wake up before daybreak, go in and say, it's Christmas, get up, and we'd get up. And my folks would always make us go back to bed because it was too early. And the rules in our house were that you did not go into the living room where the tree and the presents were until everybody was up and ready to go. All bathroom duties were done and all that kind of stuff. And we had wall heater at that time. I guess you'd call it a Florida wall heater that was on the wall that was a hall. Okay, so we had bedrooms like this around the living room. The bedrooms would have made an L shape around the living room. And then, so the hallway that connected all the bedrooms, there was a heater that was on the living room side and then went through that wall onto the hallway side. So when we'd get up, it was always cold. And us kids would go stand by that heater to stay warm while we waited for the folks to get up and get ready. So we were all, and that was, like I said, it was shared the wall with the living room, and the doorway to the living room was right there. So we'd always be peeking around that doorway into the living room to see how many presents were under the tree and stuff. We weren't allowed to go in there until my folks said, okay, let's go. Then we'd all run in and sit down around the tree, and one of my parents would pass out the gifts, and that was great fun. So, and we almost always got one new outfit at least for a gift on Christmas, and sometimes new shoes, but usually just a new outfit. And after we opened all of our gifts, we would run over to Chuck and Cheryl's house next door to see what they got. And my mother used to babysit Chuck and Cheryl periodically, so they were probably our best childhood friends because we spent so much time together. I think that their mother may have worked. Most of the moms in the neighborhood were stay-at-home moms, but their mother may have worked off and on because I just remember my mother babysitting them quite often. I mean, they were at our house a lot, and we'd take baths together and take naps together, and I mean, so she may have worked. I'm not sure. Anyway, their dad was he worked in the police force. I think he was a highway patrolman, but I really don't remember. That's strange. But so there were times when his job was nighttime, and in the years that he worked nights, they would open their gifts in the nighttime, and so when we run over in the morning, it was like, no, you can't come in because everybody's sleeping because the dad had been up all night, and so we had to be real quiet. That was crummy. Those were the crummy times. But on the times when they opened their gifts in the morning, we'd run over there to see what they got, and then we'd all go out. And generally, I think Cheryl and I would run over to Carla's across the street to see what she had gotten too, but I don't remember that as much. But anyway, so then we'd play with our gifts, our new toys for a while, and then my folks would call us in to get dressed, and we'd get dressed in our new outfit that we had gotten for Christmas. Now, back in the day, you didn't go out and socialize in your play clothes. You got dressed into your better clothes. So we would have play clothes, which were generally, pants and shirts, shorts and shirts, regular things like that. But our school clothes the girls always had to wear dresses. You weren't allowed to wear pants to school. So we had, and our school shoes were Oxfords. Now you'd have to, if you don't know what those are, you'd have to look those up online. They were black and white saddle shoes. We called them saddle shoes because it looked like a saddle on the shoe. You've probably seen them, but maybe not. You guys might be too young to have even been told about those, but those were our school shoes because they would last pretty good, and you could scuff them up pretty good. So, but for dress up, for going fancy places or any place that wasn't school type stuff where you were going to be playing, we had patent leathers, and I love my patent leathers. Those are shiny black or white shoes that they were real shiny. Look those up, patent leather shoes. That's what we'd wear. Anyway, so when we went out, like when we went Christmas Eve, we would dress up to go to my aunt and uncle's house to eat dinner. I remember one year I had gotten this new dress, and we had actually gone to my grandpa's on my mom's side too sometime that year, but at any rate, or maybe he was at, Grandpa may have come to my aunt and uncle's too, actually. But I had this new dress, and I got to wear my frilly petticoats underneath, and it was those kind that stood all out. I loved that dress. But we got dressed up pretty good. So on Christmas morning, we'd have to come in and get dressed in our new clothes, and then we'd go over to my other aunt and uncle's, which was my mother's stepsister, because my mother's mother died of, I think my mother told me breast cancer, but my sister doesn't remember that, so I'm not sure I have that right. At any rate, she was sick for quite a while when my mother was growing up, and my mother took care of her brother, who was 8 years younger than her, and that was my uncle that we would go to on Christmas Eve. And when my mother was 19 years old, her mother died. So I never knew my grandma on my mom's side, my original grandma, but my grandpa remarried, and that's the grandma I knew. Grandma Jenny was my grandpa's second wife, and his daughter was the aunt that we went to visit on Christmas morning, and they had a daughter named Scotty Lynn, and I love Scotty Lynn. She was more my sister's age, I think, or maybe between me and my sister, I'm not sure, but at any rate, I love Scotty Lynn. She was always so fun to go visit, And she was an only child, so she had her own bedroom, which was a nice sized bedroom. They had they to me, they I always thought they were rich because they had this big sprawling house, and her room, the rooms were always big, and they had lots of rooms. And my aunt would set out. They would have an all day open house on Christmas Day. So they had like four tables, three or four big tables set out with food on them. And people, when we came over, everybody who came to see them would bring some food. So the table was just chock full of food. Plus, my aunt would make a lot of food too. So she was always in the kitchen. I never thought about it at the time, but now that I'm grown and I've been through, I've entertained, that must have been horrible for her because she was just all day in the kitchen because, she was always making sure that everything was still plentiful, and anything that she made, then, she'd put out a certain amount of it and then she'd add to it as it went away. And she always made sure the new stuff was placed down. I don't know, it's just a lot of work. But it was sure fun. I mean, the place was, they even did roasted chestnuts on the open fire. It was totally cool. They'd pop, I don't remember ever really eating one, but I think I tasted. I don't think I was impressed, but it was cool that, like the song said, we roasted chestnuts on the open fire. That was on their fireplace in the house, not outside. So anyway, but that's what we would do on Christmas Day, and we would exchange gifts there also. And like I said, people would come and go all day long, and we would stay there for quite some time. So we got to see a lot of relatives that we normally didn't see. We'd see them once a year at my aunt and uncle's house, and they'd come in and visit for a while and then go, and it was just awesome. It's just one of my most favorite things to do and remember about our Christmases. I hated it when that ended. My uncle passed away one year, and we were already, teenagers, practically out of the house probably when he passed. But or maybe we were out of the house. I don't know. But anyway, when he passed, it ended. So that was a very sad time. But that's what we used to do at Christmas time. Our Easters were pretty normal. We would get a new outfit and new patent leather shoes, which a lot of times were the white patent leather, because in the summertime you'd wear white patent leather. And we'd get up and hunt. We always colored our Easter eggs the night before, and then the Easter bunny would hide them during the night, and then we'd hunt Easter eggs, and then we'd get dressed. And my parents didn't really go to church, but my mom always dropped us off, and so we could go to Sunday school on Sunday morning. I don't think my dad was really religious at all. My mother, though, was raised Christian Scientist, and she wanted us exposed to it, so she would take us and drop us off at Sunday school. So our Easters were pretty, traditional of everybody's. I mean, it wasn't anything super special. We didn't have like special meals or we'd get together with people sometimes, or we'd do something, but it wasn't tradition. It was just the normal Easter stuff. But another tradition that we always had was our camping trips. And those are the other really special part of my childhood. On Labor Day weekend, we would always go to Avila. And when we were young, when we were little, you could camp on the beach at Avila. Now, Avila nowadays is a very ritzy, wealthy people live there and stuff, and they messed it all up, in my opinion, because it was just this little hole in the wall that was not known by a lot of people. The beach would be kind of, there'd be people there, but it wasn't overly crowded. I mean, you could camp on the beach, for heaven's sake, so it wasn't overly crowded, but there was just a little narrow road that led in from the freeway, and you'd come in over by these big water tanks, and then you'd drop down into Avila. And on one side of the street was a little strip of buildings that were the restaurants and stuff. and on the other side was the beach. So you had this just little bitty strip of stores. Um, and at the and there was a fish. Uh, it wasn't a market store. I don't know what it was called, but it's where the fishermen, because this place where Avila is, the fishermen used to go out and fish, and then they'd bring their fish in, and they'd bring them to this fish place and have them weighed and, probably dressed out for sale. But my dad took us fishing on the wharf one year, probably more than one year, but this one year I remember at the end of the wharf on Avila, and I caught a fish. I caught one of the biggest fish I ever caught in my whole life. I don't remember what kind of fish it was. I can't remember, but it was, to me, huge. It was. I'm thinking it was, I don't know, foot and a half long. It was a good sized fish for a little kid, and so my dad said, "Well, let's take it up to the fish place and have them weigh it." So we took it up there, and the guy, they're used to big, huge ocean fish. That man took my fish and flung it over his shoulder as if it was one of these big fish and carried it over to the scale to weigh it. I was impressed. I just thought that was so cool. I don't think I have a picture of me with that fish, but I was just so excited to have caught that big fish. We used to do fun things there, like there was a place. I can't remember if it was there or Shell Beach, because when we were there, we'd always go visit Shell Beach also, and it was called Shell Beach because the beach was nothing but a bunch of little bitty shells. You were walking on this shells that were like large pieces of sand, but they were either pieces of shells or they were little bitty shells, and it was cool because you could find all sorts of cool things in there. But either on the edge of Avila or at Shell Beach, or one of the beaches around there where we used to go visit, there was a place where when the tide went out, there was a bunch of rocks that you could walk out on, and there would be little puddles left in the rocks from when the ocean had been up there, because the ocean covered these when it was high tide. And we'd go out there, and you could see little things growing or living in these little pools. And so I saw this really cool flower. I was going to pick it and take it to my mom. It was gorgeous. It was all these things were waving in the water and everything. I reached down to pick it, and it closed right up because it was one of those sea creatures that has all the tentacles and everything. It probably would have stung me or something had I actually stuck my finger in it, but I was going to pick it. I can't ever say I was the brightest child in the world. I never claimed to be. But anyway, and then there'd be little octopus. Yeah, octopus. In some of them, you could flip over a rock. My dad would show us all that. You could flip over a rock, and a little octopus would go swimming away. And one time we caught one, and I was going to bring it home. And for some reason, my parents let me do that. Now, I don't know why they would let me do that, because you can't possibly take an octopus from the ocean and bring it home and have it survive. I thought you could just put salt in the water. But anyway, on the way, we went to visit another beach, and its water had splashed out of the cup that I had it in. And I had to go down to the ocean and get more water, and I think there was a huge difference in the temperature of the water where I did this, because that little octopus its little arms just went up in the air and it died. And to this day, I feel bad. I'm sorry, God. I didn't mean to do it. I didn't know, but my parents let me do that. As I relate these stories, I realize that we grew up in a very strange house. My parents let us do. Well, we had a rabbit once that we would just let run around the yard. I know it went into the neighbors and ate flowers in their garden. That's terrible. We did terrible things as we grew up. At any rate, that that was what we did on Labor Day every year. We would go there, and when they changed it so that you couldn't camp on the beach anymore, they had these little at the end of this strip of buildings that were stores. They had these little old, rundown hotel rooms, probably more you'd call them motel rooms, right on the end. I think there was about 3 or 4 of them that were right on the street, and then they had a few in the back of there also. And we always tried to get one right on the street, and generally we did. And it was very cool, even though they were these funky, old, rundown buildings. It was so cool. And because we could walk out the door and we were right there on this street that went in front of the little stores, and right across, you walk across the street and you go down on the beach. The beach was lower than the road, and the whole strip of road had steps that went down to the sand. And in the winter, probably, I never saw it this way, but I'm thinking in the winter, the water actually, when it was high tide, would come up to this wall that was built that was keeping the water from taking out the road. But yeah, one year, we have a picture of this too. I should just get out pictures. I keep saying that, but I don't do it. We went out and got a whole bunch of seaweed, and we made hula skirts, or at least I did. I don't know. I have a picture of it anyway. Made hula skirts with these long strips of seaweed. We did fun stuff. Anyway, so that was our Avila. And then in the spring, right after school was out, immediately after school was out, we would go to Bass Lake and camp. And generally, we'd camp there for two weeks. And back then, it was first come, first serve, so that's why we went tried to get there before anybody else so that we could get a good campsite. We almost always stayed in Spring Cove. It was the coolest campsite ever. And of course now they messed it all up. But back then it was so overgrown that it was just all shady in there. So you never got an overly sunny campsite, which was important because California gets very hot in the summertime. So everybody wanted shady campsites. But it was so overgrown, and the trees were so tall that it was like shadowy in there all the time. And there was this little creek that ran through the whole campground. So every campsite practically was close enough to that creek where you could go down and play in the creek. That was totally cool. And the creek went out to the lake. The lake was across the main street from the campsite. But we'd almost always stay there. And my dad, at least once, but I think more than once, when we'd go, he would bring a wooden crate, the kind of things that back in the day Coke were shipped in and stuff. You could get these crates for nothing. And he attached the crate to a tree so that my mother had shelves to put the cooking supplies on. And then he'd set up the table underneath that tree, so it was all very convenient. And terrible. I mean, I don't think you can do that today. They don't let you, and which they shouldn't, because it's not good for the trees. But maybe we didn't know that. I don't know. There were a lot of nails in the trees, so people just did that. That's what they did. I mean, we weren't just the awful people. That's what a lot of campers did, you could tell. But anyway, and then we never had a tent or anything. We would sleep under the stars. And so my dad would run a rope around a grouping of trees and then hang blankets over the rope to create a dressing room so that we had a place to change our clothes. So that's how we camped. And once when we were, I'm going to say I was probably still in elementary school. We were camping one year, and as soon as it got dusk, somebody yelled Elmer. And it was dark enough that you really couldn't see them, but it was still a little hint of light, you know. People were doing their dinner and all that kind of stuff. And you heard somebody go, Elmer. And then somebody else would go, Elmer. And pretty soon all these people were yelling Elmer. And I am so surprised now that I'm on the internet of people who lived in other states who also had Elmer in their campsites. Now, we were told at the time that they thought it was some college students who were either they did it as a hoax or they were looking for a person or a dog, and they spread out in the campsite, so they were yelling at each other, which started the whole thing off. I don't know what the true story is behind Elmer, but Elmer, from that year on, Elmer was at the campsite. And you can go today to a campsite and yell Elmer, and it won't be like it was where everybody did it, but somebody will yell Elmer back. When we left the campsite that year, we always left the wooden box in the tree for the next camper. And we wrote a note on the wooden box that said Elmer was here. Then, they wouldn't know in the beginning, but as soon as dusk fell, they would know why we put that there. But anyway, that was very cool. We would do that every year, and when we were young, I think my dad spent the whole 2 weeks with us. But as we got older, his job became more, he had his own business, so his job became better, and he had so much business that he had to work a lot. So he would take us up on the weekend, set us all up in the campsite, and then he'd go home during the week, and my mother would just take care of us by herself. And she seemed to love it. I mean, I can't imagine, but she did it, and then he'd come up on the weekend and stay with us on the weekend and then go back home. We did that for 2 weeks. It was very cool. One year, we could not get a place in Spring Cove. We came too late or something, and we couldn't get Spring Cove. And we might have had to do that more than 1 year. I don't remember, but I do remember that at least 1 year we camped at the Forks instead. Now, I have to tell you, when we stayed in Spring Cove, we used to always walk to McDougal's. McDougal's is still there, but now they call it Miller's Landing. But back in the day, it was McDougal's, and it was just a little store. I mean, it still looks the same as far as I know. I haven't been there in a while, but I still think it even looks the same. But it was a little store, and they sold a lot of souvenirs and stuff that you could buy that said Bass Lake on them and everything. And I believe they had an ice cream parlor in there. I sort of recall eating ice cream cones from there, but I don't remember. I don't think back then they sold hamburgers or anything, but now they do sell hamburgers and stuff there. But it was just a fun place for us kids to go, and it was only a couple of coves over, so it was a very short walk. I mean, you'd walk from Spring Cove to another cove to maybe one more, and then you were in McDougal's. And you used to be able to, back then, you could write a letter to Bass Lake General Delivery, and it would go to McDougal's. And McDougal's had this little room attached to the front of their little store that was where the mail was. And this lady would sit in there. I guess she sat in there all day. And you could go there and tell her your name, and she would look through all the general delivery to see if you had mail in there, and then you'd get your mail that way. And we used to tell our friends, we were going to be there for 2 weeks, write us, or we would write from there, and then they would write back. And that was great fun, knowing that you could go there and just tell them your name and pick your mail up. It's great. It was like the Waltons, they went and got their general delivery mail. That was cool. Anyway, so part of our Bass Lake adventure was walking to McDougal's, which is great fun. So the year that we had to camp at the Forks instead, now the Forks was a long way from McDougal's. It was like a quarter of the lake, away. I mean, it was a lot of coves. But we were there, and we couldn't be camping without walking to McDougal's. So there was a large group of us. We had met some boys there, Johnny and Danny Atade. They were cool. I'll bet they don't remember us at all, but they were just really cool people. And I think our friend Carol was with us that year, which there's pictures online of the three, my sister and Carol and I, and those are in Facebook, and those are from the year we stayed at the Forks campground. Anyway, we decided that we had to walk to McDougal's. And this is a little narrow road. I mean, it's not. We were a little old. We were teenagers, early teens by then. I was probably 13 or 14, because my sister was probably 15 or 16 is what I'm thinking. Anyway, so, there was enough of us that it wasn't dangerous, but except for being on the road, because the road's very narrow, but people drove slow. So we walked to McDougal's. It took forever. By the time we got back, we had blisters on our feet. It was because we went barefooted, and that's what you do when you're at Bass Lake. So we had blisters on our feet, but it was so much fun. I mean, we loved every minute of it. So that was I'm trying to think if there was something else about Bass Lake. When back then, like I think I said, it was first come, first served to get a campsite. You couldn't reserve a campsite. So that's why we always wanted to try to be there to get the best campsites, because they'd fill up fairly quickly, and you were only allowed to camp for 2 weeks, so that made rollover pretty good, but still. So one year, my parents had enrolled, I guess you'd call it enrolled, signed us up for some sort of little kids rodeo. And I don't know what that was all about. I don't know where they even found out. And I don't know where it happened at. But they had signed us up, and it was on the same weekend as the weekend we would go to Bass Lake. And we didn't want to miss out on our campsite, so we packed up, went to Bass Lake, and unloaded our pickup, our vehicle. I'm not sure we had the pickup at that time, but I don't think we did. So we unloaded the vehicle, and put all the stuff out. We didn't set the campground up, but we put all the stuff out in the campground on the table and around. Our chairs were all out there. People, I just didn't steal back then like they do now, as I think about this, because nowadays you wouldn't even think about doing that, because when you came back, all of your cool stuff would be gone. But we went to the rodeo, which was the only reason probably I remember it is because one of the events was a donkey ride and race, and what we had, they were little donkeys, and what we had to do is jump onto the donkey and then race to the finish line. And I couldn't get on my donkey, but he was running the race because he wasn't going to get left behind. So I'm running along trying to jump onto this donkey as he's running down the thing to get to the end. And I never did get on him. It was terribly embarrassing. But, it's one of those things. Anyway, we came back from there, and here were these people in our campsite. And my dad said, heck are you doing? And this is our campsite. And the guy said, well, you weren't here. Nobody was here. So, you know, too bad for you. And my dad, I guess, said, no, too bad for you because we got the campsite. But I don't remember how exactly we did. My dad was a pretty scary guy, though. He had these big Popeye arms. This part of his arm was bigger than the rest, and he looked tough, you know. So he could look really tough. So maybe he intimidated the guy. I don't know. I don't remember, but I just remember that guy thinking he was going to steal our campground. And today, of course, he would have. No, because you have reservations today, so I guess that wouldn't happen. I understand the reasoning for that. Too many people now. You can't hardly get a campsite unless you reserve a year ahead of time, I guess. But, yeah, there was something else I thought about. Okay. So, at some point in time during our growing up, when we were still in our early teens, maybe, my dad acquired a big homemade ski boat, inboard ski boat that I think it came from his uncle or somebody. I don't know. My uncle, maybe his I don't know. Somebody in our family, in his side of the family, I think, had made this boat. And so it was very unique because it didn't look like any other boat out there because this is homemade, very heavy, bulky thing. But it was a great ski boat because it would pull up like it had power. I think it had a real car engine in it, actually. It got very hot because you can get burned on it. I mean, we knew that from experience. If you got too close, when you walked down the little aisle that was between the engine and the side of the boat, because the engine was in the middle of the boat, so you'd go from where my dad was driving back to where the seats were for us kids. If you walked along there and hit that engine, you'd get burnt. But at any rate, when we had that, we also had the Willie's Jeep pickup. And so my dad would put all of our camping stuff, like he'd fill the boat, and then he'd fill the back of the pickup. So we took a lot of stuff because they were full to the brim. And on the stuff in the pickup, he would put a mattress over the top of everything that he had put in the pickup. And then he would tie it all down with a rope. And then us kids would get up on there and sit on that mattress, which was probably this far above the top of the bed of the pickup. Sit on that mattress with our backs against the cab of the truck, because there were no seats. It was only the one seat in the pickup. You didn't have a back seat. And so the only place you could ride is in the back of the pickup. So we'd be up on top of this mattress driving to Bass Lake, managing not to fall out. With our dog. I mean, we would always take our dog Bobo, and so he would jump up there also and be sitting on the mattress with us kids. But or sometimes maybe my mother would take him in the cab, but I don't know. I know Bobo always went with us, so he was probably up there on the mattress. But so then when we get to the campsite, my dad would unload everything and then put the mattress in the bed of the pickup. This was, I guess we'd maybe also take a car, because he would leave the pickup there. I think we did that when he was going to stay the whole 2 weeks, because he'd put the mattress in the back of the car, and then the pickup, and that's where him and my mom would sleep, so they didn't have to sleep on the ground, which I can totally understand, because although I loved it as a kid, nowadays when you know what lives in the ground, all underneath where you're laying, I don't want to be there. That was scary stuff. I don't know why I wasn't scared back in the day, but I wasn't. But anyway, those were our camping trips that we would take every year, and it was tradition. We always did it until, we were teenagers by the time we quit going camping, and we probably only quit because we left home. My sister moved out probably when she was 18. I don't know. She went to college and lived in a little, shared apartment type thing with somebody. And so that's probably about when we quit going, but it was great fun. Thanksgiving for us was, again, it was just family. We hardly ever got together with extended family. It was just us usually. And we always did, our tradition was we always had turkey and stuffing and mashed potatoes and gravy and cranberry sauce. You just, and candied yams, candied sweet potatoes. But we didn't have a traditional every year we'd get together with certain people or whatever when I was little. After I started having kids, then I started having Thanksgiving. I was pretty much the person who did the Thanksgiving, so that was a cool tradition for us when we got older. But anyway, that was part of the tradition. I've hit the highlights of them. I'm sure there are other things that we did on a regular basis that will come up, and then I'll relate later. I think this video has gotten, I've talked too much. This jabbering Memaw, I can't shut up. So I'm going to end this one and try to remember some of the other things to bring up that weren't necessarily what you'd call traditions, but things that we did that were fun back in the day when life was easier and we didn't have the electronics that kept us from going out and enjoying the world. I worry for future generations that you're going to miss so much. But anyway, I love you, and thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.